Good evening, everybody. My name is Gordy Carmona, and I am the co-founder of Stripes of Pride. And today's discussion on Let's Talk is raising gender diverse children in America. Before we get into introductions of our panelists, I did want to make a statement. When we were forming the panel, we wanted to make sure that we had a diverse panel of people. Unfortunately, one of our mothers, April, was not able to be joining us for personal reasons. So we do look forward to having her back at a future time with a continuation of this conversation with the all BIPOC panel. And as well, Amber stepped aside to allow Priya to join us, and Sarah stepped away for mental health reasons as well. With all that being said, let's go ahead and introduce our panel. If Priya, if you would like to go introduce yourself with any comments or how you express yourself.
Well, thank you, Gordy, and thank you everyone for having us here. It's a really important space, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you, Amber, for thinking of me. I am a mom and part-time instructor in gender studies here in California. I live in Orange County, and so I can speak to both kind of what it was like, or my journey along with my daughter, but also how it is to navigate supposedly spaces with good laws, but bad policies on the ground. That's something, if folks have questions, that's our life here in Orange County. And I'd love to speak also about kind of navigating Asian American families and relationships. We have an incredibly supportive family, but it took some work. So I would love to share about that. Thank you, everyone.
And Lizette?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lizette Trujillo. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the mother of a soon-to-be 14-year-old trans son. Excuse me. I am a small business owner, but I also run and facilitate a family support group locally and do support groups for trans families, and work with a lot of families and helping guide them through their process and looking for support and helping guide them to how to make their life and the life of their child more easy to navigate, especially with resources and getting them to a space of empathy and affirming their child. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Rachel?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm going to start by apologizing for the chaos in my house that constantly exists, especially at this hour. You may hear some background noise while I'm talking and kids running behind me. My Rachel Gonzalez, she, her pronouns. I am the parent of 3, and my eldest is trans. She is 11 and transitioned socially when she was 5. And I'm excited to be here and chat with y'all about this.
And Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Rodriguez. I have a trans 17-year-old son who's headed off to college in 15 days. Not okay, but I'm also a social worker in the Austin area, and thank you for inviting me to be here, Gordy.
Okay. Before we start on the conversation, I did want to make sure that we are respectful to our panelists, and we will not be accepting any questions from viewers as far as transition specifics on the children. And if our panelists have not divulged their children's name, we're not going to be asking their names either, to be respectful. Okay, so to start, I would like to ask our panelists, around what time did your children begin to express gender diversity, and that conversation started with them? Anybody can start the conversation.
So my son transitioned at age 13. However, looking back, as young as 18 months old, you could kind of see the signs. If only I'd known, like kind of looking back, like, wow, I wish I had known when he refused to wear dresses at 18 months old that, but he officially says he had the language to kind of come out and tell me when he was 13. And it wasn't super shocking. I think a lot of people were shocked, but to me, I was just kind of like, oh, let me find out more information about what that means, but I'm always going to love you no matter what. So.
Well, Lizette?
Our child started showing gender nonconformity when he was 2.5. And this was insistent and consistent throughout his life. I kind of talk about this as like puzzle pieces, right? Like we were my husband and I very early on were having conversations around gender and what did that mean for our child, but we were really afraid to give it a term. A lot of that had to do with like stigma and discrimination and the fact that we're Latinx people and we're already kind of aware of what oppression looks like. And we just thought, oh, I don't want to deal with this other layer. And so we avoided it as best as we could, as much as we could. And then our child was presenting as male at school. And so this brought up a lot of conversations. If I was like volunteering in the classroom, why does Daniel want to be a boy? Why does Daniel always talk about how he's a boy? And eventually his friend is the one who asked me, hey, can Daniel and I go play? Can he and I go play? And that's what brought in the conversation of like, this is really happening. Our child is presenting as male at school, and we really have to offer support to him, and we have to figure out what it is that we need to do. And so it wasn't like a moment when our kid was like, this is what it is. It was a lot of moments and a lot of ways in which he was expressing himself. And I often like to say a mother's heart knows. But it was for us, like, here we are, we're gonna have to navigate this whole other kind of world of, and really there's a lot of discrimination against trans people. And so I often say that I failed at the beginning. Like people are like, do you think you handled it well? And I'm like, no, I saw all these bits of his life and I tried to ignore it or tried to suppress it in all these different ways. And so I felt a lot of guilt. And the second that we had that conversation with him when he was 8, we supported him and followed his lead and began to do the work that we needed to do to affirm and love him.
Priya?
I would say our story is in some ways very similar to what you heard before. There was a moment, but the moment spoke to many, many other moments for years prior. So my daughter was almost 7 when she came up to me and said, like, Mom, I'm telling you something. You're not listening to me. I'm a girl. And that was the moment that I started my journey, but she had started hers much before. A lot of the reason why, just like Lizette, I had a lot of fear. I teach queer studies and I'm a gender studies professor. And so prior to this, I had heard so many stories from my students about what they have dealt with. And I had actually lost a student who was very dear to me to a trans student who was very dear to me to suicide. So I had a lot of fears about what my child's life would look like as a brown trans girl living in Orange County, to be honest. And so I think just like Lizette, I almost didn't want to believe it until I recognized that it's not a question of what I want to believe or what my husband wants to believe. It's not even a question of our fear because she is communicating. She didn't know the word. She knew strongly enough who she.
And Rachel?
So I feel like I haven't really told this story in so long because I feel like it's just such old news and I remember when Libby was transitioning, thinking I would never feel like I feel now, that it was all that we thought about. It, very similar to the stories you heard before. There was lots and years of moments of pushing back and Libby just getting progressively more withdrawn and angry and needing to sorry, we have some Pokemon drama happening behind the screen here. Hey, just a second, Hawk. I'll talk to you in just a second. It was a moment where we thought a lot of different things, but my husband really had a difficult time allowing Libby to express herself in attire. I took a really firm stand by the time she was 4 in not forcing her to cut her hair. For me, that's violating her bodily autonomy. And I was never going to do anything to my kids' bodies without their consent. So by the time she turned 4, she was refusing to cut her hair and I was not going to make her. And so she started growing out her hair by the time she was 4, but takes a while. And so we had a process. And so after Christmas, when my younger daughter received all these different gifts for girls from other family members, and she really is not into material items at all, so she didn't really care, but Libby really, really wanted all of those gifts. It was like such a slap in the face to her that she hit a wall and was just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I need Santa to turn me into a girl. Just a minute, I'm talking, thanks. And so that's when we realized we needed to support her in that. And I told her she didn't have to wait another year until next Christmas. And I took her shopping and that just was the beginning of repair emotionally for her, because she had really tanked over the previous 18 months to 2 years emotionally and wasn't wanting to go in public. At the age of 5, she was hiding behind me. If she was meeting new people, she was really withdrawn. And so we realized that it was time, and she's been doing really well ever since.
That's awesome. And as far as social transitioning goes, without specific details, how much of a change have you seen in your child's the way they present themselves to people outside of the family circle and friend circle? Like, how do they how do you see them being more comfortable being their authentic self outside of the family realm? Family realm, typically when someone...
Are you asking?
What was that, Rachel?
Or are you asking me, or are you asking
general,
the entire
people.
panel? Oh, okay.
Panel. So like, what kind of changes did you see? Because within the family community, I'm assuming it's a little bit easier to a certain extent as far as people that you don't know. Did you see a gradual or a big shift once they were given the space to socially transition and be who they are authentically? Yes, Priya?
I would say a huge shift almost immediately in confidence and just kind of desire to be out in the world. And now it's been 5 years and I don't think we even think about it because she is so comfortable in her skin and her body. But those early, I think I was more nervous because I was nervous about what, you know, a plethora of things, mostly about safety. But yeah, it made a huge difference. A lot of what you've heard before, but you know, I can't even imagine what it must have been like to have to wear clothing that you know is not for you. At the time, she had a uniform at school, and so she was still wearing the male identified uniform. And that was very, very hard to rip it off the minute she came home from school. So that freedom the freedom we all take for granted to be able to express our gender in the way that we're most comfortable with. I don't think we can really understate how important, or overstate, I'm sorry, how important that is.
My kid was super creative in trying to push for male, or like the stereotypical male clothing. And so like my kid was like, can I be sporty? I remember he was like in an Oliver Twist play and would wear that costume over and over again. Or he really wanted to be a musketeer, and I ordered one on Amazon and wore that everywhere. And if he wasn't wearing clothing that was comfortable, then he spent a lot of time in like, you know, bottoms or pajamas or things that were non-gendered in his world. And so it's something that our family saw and was quite angry about, frankly. So we had a very difficult time with our family, just because you asked about family, Gordy. And so our family was, especially on my husband's side, was traditional. On my side, there was more religiously traditional. And on my side, my family was more worried about what does this mean in terms of discrimination? Like, you're making life harder. So there was a lot of navigating family and giving them resources and helping them along. It's been 6 years now. There was a moment where we kind of straddled that in between, where Daniel was still going to school as his sex assigned at birth, and then coming home and getting to be himself. And that was more out of not understanding our rights. Like, what would happen if CPS was called? How could I prove that this was an experience that I was having? It was the same thing around pediatric care. Like when we would go to the doctor, like we had already cut his hair and I wouldn't use pronouns because I was terrified. And so once I was able to meet a parent community that was like, no, look, these are your rights. These are things where you're going to be safe. Here's what you can do. That I really started pushing social transition more quickly for him, because then I felt comfortable. Like, I know a path forward. And I know that I'll be protected and that my child won't be taken from me, because you had heard those horror stories, right, about CPS and needing a safe folder at that time. And so it's what really made me committed to helping other families, was that not understanding my rights as a parent, and how to truly support my kid in those public spaces. Now he is living his authentic self. He's 14. So social transition began when he was 8. He's happy and thriving. And it's not to say that he doesn't have his challenges or things that he worries about, but the fact that he knows that his parents affirm him, and he knows that we're doing everything that we can to advocate for him and to keep him safe, gives him a sense of self that is joyful, and his quality of life is drastically better than had we been, living in that in between still today, right? We've done everything that we need to in terms of social transition, and even updated his records with like name change and gender marker and things that affirm him in who he is. And so he is himself and getting to live that way in the world and being seen that way in the world, which is so critically important.
Yeah, so Grayson was 13. He pretty much told me, like, hey, this is who I am. take it or leave it. I, of course, was like, well, let's figure this out. He was not slow about anything. Like, let's redo my room. I'm chopping off my hair. Like, get on board and let's go. So I kind of felt like I let him lead. And so I certainly we raced through like the social portion of the transition. Like, he had a new wardrobe within a couple of, like, I think a week. And he had a haircut within a few days. And, we were trying out different names. And I was trying to learn the pronouns. And so we kind of kept it to just our small little family at first. And then his father and I are divorced. So there was a conversation with my ex-husband, who is no longer part of Grayson's life. Thankfully, he was not supportive at all. So we had to deal a lot with that family. He has no relationship with his half sister, which breaks his heart. No relationship with his biological father or anyone in that family. And during a really long, painful custody battle, I think CPS has seen me 4 or 5 times. Like, I had to have the safe folder. My parents are a little older, but they surprisingly kind of went, that makes sense. And my mom's big on like research. So she read a lot of books, looked into things, like did her own research to kind of make her feel better about it. My parents are both very supporting of Grayson. My husband now, we've been together 5 years. So he met me right before Grayson transitioned, and he's just been the best support. He's Grayson's father now. So it's really great that he had a positive male figure besides my dad, because his biological father was not a good resource during this time. And so he had to kind of deal with a lot of unfortunate drama with being misgendered, forced into female clothing when he went to go visit his father before we terminated his rights. So, I mean, it took almost 2 years of fighting in the court system to get my son his rights to be himself. But we definitely don't regret it. I know he misses his half sister terribly, but she's very young, so she doesn't really know what's going on. And so, he has the hope one day that he'll be able to reconnect with her when she's older. But I mean, it's really hard because like he had cousins and aunts and uncles and a grandma on that side. All of them have we've been disowned because they were mad about the whole custody thing. So he lost a whole side of his family. But then my husband, Alex, was really supportive there. And so he kind of was able to still have that father figure. But it's definitely not easy if both parents aren't on the same page or even in the same state. We lived in separate states, so it was a little more difficult to have conversations because we had to do them virtually or over the phone, and just lots of yelling and horrible things. So, I mean, my family is supportive. The community we lived in at the time was a smaller community, not so supportive, which is why we moved to the Austin area. But yeah, I mean, he ended up graduating high school in 3 years. He leaves in 15 days for college at age 17. So went ahead and graduated a year early on me. So, I mean, he's really thrived, and his confidence in just being able to present as his true authentic self was just so amazing to see. Like the second he got that first haircut and got some official boy clothes on, there was no stopping him. And he's been that way since. So despite all the ups and downs with families and some small town politics and stuff, he's just, I don't know, he's amazing. I don't know if I personally would have done so well with it if he hadn't just kind of rolled with the punches and was like, all right, well, you don't like me, there's the door, I'll keep moving forward. So
Lizette, you had a question? Okay. Rachel, did you want to add anything on to what you already did? Sharon, ready?
Yeah, sorry. Working out the Pokemon situation. So there was definitely like a really immediate shift, and it wasn't the whole transition. Obviously, so well, for those of you that don't know, social transition is just changing your attire, your appearance, growing out Libby's hair, changing her clothes. But it was another 6 months before we changed name and pronouns, testing out different names. She was a 5-year-old than a 6-year-old who liked names like Twinkle Sparkle. And so that obviously wasn't going to work. And so it took a little time, but it was a really, big thing for me because I have a very Catholic family, and it was very easy for me to move in and out of spaces where I didn't necessarily agree with the stance or ideas or conversations. Sorry, the door's so squeaky. Of my family members and people that were in my community. And once I had a kid that transitioned, I could not sit back and listen to horrible things that they would think and say. And to be honest, everyone that knows our family on the daily, everyone that knew Libby before she transitioned, we didn't have an issue with anyone. We did not lose a single person that was in our lives on the daily. The people that we needed to distance ourselves from, or family members or friends that did not actually know her. They were just making judgments about us as parents, or who they thought she is or should be, without actually really knowing her. So, her classmates, their parents, everyone was on board immediately. There was not an issue at all. And, the director of her preschool, I remember saying, I don't know if we've ever had a trans kid, but this is obviously a girl. So I don't really know what else to say, except obviously she knows who she is. And so, the rest is history at this point. We are very, very fortunate, even though we live in Texas, to have a super affirming community, because we have that solid base of people that were with us before and after transition immediately, that really saw firsthand what it was like for us. And, a lot of people ask us why we don't leave Texas. And that's the reason why. We cannot replicate the community that we have. We have amazing people surrounding us, and know and love us exactly as we are. And that's really hard to find, even in the most liberal cities and the most liberal states. And it really, really sucks that we have the legislature that we have. And it's terrible that we don't have good policy in place to protect kids across the state. But we're really well supported where we are. We're really, really fortunate.
And I know that Lizette, Rachel, and Priya are a part of the HRC Family Council. Before y'all were connected to that resource, how did y'all navigate having to look and do the research for yourself to help your children?
So I was in maybe an enviable position that I had been in the academic version of this field for a few years. And so I had some intellectual resources. I learned very quickly that academic resources don't equal much on the ground. It's the real life experience that makes the biggest difference. But I was able to talk to my students. They were the ones I went to first, my trans students, and really just ask them, how would you are in my shoes, or you've been in my daughter's shoes, what would you have wanted to hear from your parent? And the answer was always, you're doing that thing, which is loving her, affirming her, and then learning. So the learning, I would say, happened for me. I think it happens differently for different people. I like talking to other parents. That was very helpful for me, like a few years down the road. For my husband, it was like, Lauren, you were saying, like your parents, it was doing the research. So there's, so many resources, good resources, not crank resources, available online in book form, in study peer review form. So he kind of did that. But what helped him, I think, the most was going to a support group and hearing from other parents who've already been going through this journey. That was that real life experiential learning that I think helped us the most.
Lizette?
Before I joined PTech, I had already connected with a support network of parents. So locally, there was a group that had been in, now we've been in existence for around 11 years, called Families Transformed, under the Southern Arizona Gender Alliance. And so when we lost our family connection, I immediately sought or tried to find resources or tried to connect with, luckily, other families. And so for me, that was really important to hear the lived experience of parents who've been navigating it already before, and navigating it in my state, because it's a patchwork of rights and policy, right? And so local people living in our area could tell me, like, that's not a safe sport or park or after school program. These are safe school districts. These are therapists that are really well versed in trans youth issues. Here are pediatricians that work with our children and are trusted and understand trans care. And so once I tapped into that, I was able to learn from them. And I never skipped a meeting for like 3 years. I was immersed in wanting to hear everyone's stories and wanting to meet other families. I think it's so important for our children to see themselves in other kids, to see that trans people exist in their world. And I think it's important for parents to open themselves up to community and meet trans adults and meet other families and see where they can learn and benefit from their lived experience. And so by the time I joined PTech, at that point, I was now facilitating and helping other families, and I was doing grassroots organizing. And so I had kind of immersed myself in getting busy, because that's how I cope with things, is to get busy. And so that was my go-to.
Lauren or Rachel?
I'm not part of the HRTC group, but I actually was looking for resources and I got connected with Rachel Gonzalez, and she could probably tell you for the first year and a half, 2 years, I blew up her phone like it was my job, because Libby had transitioned prior to Grayson, even though she was younger. So at least she could kind of help me with some family reactions, resources, for like doctors in the area, or how to even look for doctors and what to say to the doctor. Because I mean, I didn't necessarily want to go to the doctor and be like, hey, my kid says he's trans, what now? So just trying to kind of find resources for that. And she, of course, connected to me a bunch of other resources. But honestly, when he first told me, like, I remember hugging him, telling him I loved him no matter what. And then he said, cool, he was going to go play on his Xbox. And I like literally Googled, what do you do when your son says that they're trans? Like, what do you say? Like, I wanted to make sure I was doing things right. But I did a lot of my own research. And then, of course, I was able to stumble upon some people like Rachel Gonzalez. She was super helpful. Other resources in the, Texas area, or even nationwide, where I got, I found a PFLAG group that wasn't really close, but I drove from where I lived to like Austin to some PFLAG meetings, just so I didn't really feel so alone, because I kind of felt like we were the only people in the world until like I got to talk to other parents. Found some online support groups too, which is actually how we found one of his doctors. And then, another coworker introduced me to his current doctor, because his husband was a nurse there. So once you kind of get the community, it kind of starts rolling in. And so that was really nice and helpful. And like, I ended up getting my bachelor's in women and gender studies, because I figured I was basically doing it anyway. I might as well get a degree out of it. And, my son likes to joke that I always tell him he's my world. And he goes, and now I'm your career. So yay. But yeah, so I mean, it kind of, if you would have told me, I don't know, 6 years ago, this is where we would be, I don't know if I would have been totally shocked, but I don't think I would have been like, no, this is where we would be. But yeah, I'm really happy that he somehow has come out of this all decently well-adjusted, smart kid. And so I'm really, really thankful for resources like PFLAG and others, and Rachel Gonzalez, because I'm going to keep pointing to you, because I'm sure you can tell them millions of things that I did that drove you nuts, but she was my
You did
first,
not drive me nuts.
you were my first lifeline for another parent. So that was super helpful.
Well, I know what that's like. But I do, I mean, it was really traumatic. You were going through a lot, and it was, I mean, you lived in a really terrible part of Texas, and you were, I mean, it was awful. I was the person going, take him out of school. Do not leave him in that school. Move him to homeschool now. Yeah, that was me. So my husband and I are both like super extroverted extroverts. And so we host a lot of get-togethers. We do a lot. We're very busy. And so I immediately joined like the big Facebook groups, but I similar to what you've heard. It's like, you know, you feel like you're the only person. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to make a documentary. We're gonna have to do all this so other people know that this is a thing. And it turns out that already exists. And so another mom, Vanessa Ford, who is a good friend of mine, was the very first mom I was ever connected to. Similar to Lauren's story about me, that's what it is you find another parent and you ask them all the questions, and they're patient enough to answer your questions because they know what it's like. But and then, you know, a friend of a friend knew somebody locally who we were able to have over for dinner, and that also really helped my husband because it's a very different process it has been a very different process for him than it has been for me. But you know, I consistently make the joke, and several people on this call I think will know what I'm talking about when I say you know, we can thank Dan Patrick for bringing us together, because there are so many people that are just the most phenomenal human beings, and I am a much better person because they are in my life, because of the hell we have been through in Texas, because we all showed up at the Capitol, because it was like, we're not going to let this happen to our kids. All these trans elders in the community, family members, siblings, everybody showing up to say, we don't stand for this. And, you know, everybody on this panel is family to me. It is such a bonding experience to have to go through those really traumatic experiences and know that you have each other's backs. And so Texas has a phenomenal trans community. I mean, we really do. And it's and in part because of the hell we have to go through, unfortunately. But you know, I am so grateful for every single person in the community that's visible and not, the people that have shown up to be Libby's big sister, big brother, big sibling, because they have really been there from the beginning. And much like what you heard earlier, it was very intentional on my part to make sure that I was surrounding myself with trans adults that would tell me what I was doing wrong, that had the patience, because, you know, it is a lot of emotional labor to ask of trans adults to tell you when you're screwing things up. And I have had to learn a lot, but I am a much better person. I just understand so much more about myself, about the world, about equity and equality and inclusion in a way that I was completely oblivious to. And I would like to think that I am a much better ally, activist, advocate to every community that's going through whatever form of oppression. And so, yeah, leave it on that
We
awkward
did
note.
have a question from Rachel, sorry, Amanda. She says, my kiddo is 3, and some days we say we are a boy, and other days we say we are a girl. How can I help navigate them to make sure they do not feel they need to choose a gender?
I would just follow their lead. That's kind of what I was always taught in the beginning and had to learn. So if today is a day where they want to dress like a girl or be called Twinkle Toes, I know little kids love those interesting names, then, you know, do your best to let them be Twinkle Toes and wear the girly dress if it's okay. Obviously keeping in mind safety depending on where you are. They may not be able to wear it out in public yet. Depends on your level of comfort and the level of safety you have. But then, you know, on their boy days, they can be, you know, Jake and wearing Superman stuff and just kind of follow their lead. Let them know that, you know, you support and love them. And then, of course, you can reach out to like local resources like PFLAG, finding support groups of other parents. Rachel may have more info with littler kids or something, but yeah, I just follow their lead within reason.
I would piggyback on what Lauren is saying by saying that, you know, not everybody, our stories are all of binary transition, which means our children were assigned one of two options in a binary system at birth. And when transitioned, identify on the other side of the binary, but not all trans people follow that same pattern. And so the term non-binary is one that you could, you know, you may already be familiar with, but there are so many people for whom this binary doesn't fit because it's actually a man-made construction that's relatively new. That's the professor in me. If anybody wants to know how that came to be, talk to me. But it's a very kind of, in modern, I mean, in human history, it's a very new idea that you're just one of two things. And we know that our bodies don't fit in that binary. 1 in every 200 babies is intersex, meaning their genitalia, inner and outer, their chromosomes, their gonads don't fit within our very simplistic binary system where how we assign sex, and equally people's gender identity. So that might even, in whatever language Amanda like sounds, you know, for a 3-year-old, but just to say, you know what, we don't actually have to decide right now, or some people aren't just a boy or just a girl. You know, in whatever way you think that that's, you know, helpful for a child, but I think giving them the understanding, like the society tells them they have to be one or the other, but that's not how people and identities and bodies necessarily.
So we had a local family. I apologize. I dropped
That's okay.
resources in the chat, but we also, there was kind of a fun thing that a local family did, in that they built like a genderverse kind of grid, right? And they made like stickies with pronouns and like, how would you like to express today? And then their child would kind of grab pronouns and grab like an expression, because, you know, expression and gender are two different things. So until they have the language to talk about whether what they're experiencing is like identity or that they're just expressing themselves in a certain way, until they can express or say that or know the difference. I think it was kind of like a fun game that they gave their child to kind of reduce the pressure, right? Of like, what does the day look like? Am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to be unaffirming? Am I going to hurt them? And so it was an opportunity for the child to say, like, today I want these pronouns and this is how I am going to express myself. And they would stick it somewhere in like the universe, their genderverse board. And then the parents say, this is wonderful. And then affirm them that day in that way. And it just kind of like, I know we say like that your children's guide you, but there were times when Daniel was like, I didn't have language. I didn't have the words. I didn't know I could be. And it was helpful that you were giving me resources to help me. Because again, like when they're that small, you're not letting them be online. Like my kid didn't have access to YouTube or these resources that teenagers will go to when it comes to TikTok or Discord, where they're having those discussions as teenagers. And so with small people, I think it's really important to just let them know that you love them and you're there for them, but also it's okay to be like creative in how you're going to talk about gender and gender expression. and keep the pressure low. I mean, I always tell Daniel, I've never been a mom before, and so I'm gonna make mistakes. And I think that it's really important as parents to know that like we're doing the best that we can, and to kind of create a space where everyone can learn and grow together. I always talk about teamwork. We're a team in this, and we're gonna make some faulty choices, and then we'll move forward.
Melissa posted a comment in the chat that the
I
concern.
dropped a link.
Excuse me?
Oops. I dropped a link for the safe folder. I saw Melissa's comment. I think it kind of depends on where. So Melissa asked if you think a safe folder is necessary. I dropped a link on what a safe folder is. I just did a quick Google search. But I think it depends on where you live and what your kids, how public you are. I think there's a variety of different layers. There are people whose families call CPS on them. Definitely, if you are in that demographic of people that you are likely to have CPS called on, you should definitely have a safe folder. I don't think it's a bad idea for anyone to have a safe folder. But I think it just depends on your comfort level, and especially if you live in a state that is consistently attacking trans kids, it's definitely a good idea.
And can you elaborate more on specifically what a safe folder is for those that may not know what that is?
A safe folder is a folder with a bunch of documents in it that you have compiled that basically prove that your kid is trans, like a letter from a doctor, letters from friends, drawings that your kid has drawn of themselves, whatever evidence you can pull together that shows that you are not transing your kid, as is used as a verb by our wonderful legislature. We definitely have a variety of different, we have letters from therapists, from physician, from friends, we have all these photos drawings from when Libby was really little. And, I think I also find comfort in the buffer that we have of our community, that I don't personally think it's going to be a huge issue for me. But now that I've said that here, who knows? I probably jinxed myself. I definitely recommend it in general.
It came in really handy for me because I am one of those people who had that side of the family that wanted to call CPS on me. So Gray is pretty artistic, but I didn't really have any pictures from when he was like that he drew. But I had pictures of him from being like 2 or 3, where he is, wearing his Spider-Man pajamas. Pictures of him on his first bike, which was like a bright orange flame BMX bike, because we couldn't do anything girly. So just stuff like that. Letters from friends, family. Once we found his affirming doctors, we had letters from them stating that, they had spoken to my child without me there, that, this is how my child felt, this is who my child is. And then after our first CPS case got closed, they actually gave me a letter stating that, none of this so-called forcing my child to become trans had been found. So I actually even started keeping the case closure letters, because then the next time they tried it, I literally handed that letter to the lady, and the second case was closed super quick because she was like, oh, we've been here, done that, they're just mad. So I never really thought in the beginning that I would need one, but I had heard so much about it from other parents. But honestly, it was like a Mother's Day. They called me while we were out for Mother's Day lunch, and CPS was like, get here now. Like, you need to come home. We've got to find out what you're doing to your quote unquote daughter. And so, I mean, if I hadn't had it, I don't know how things would have went, but it's always nice to have in your back pocket, especially when you live in Texas. So I'm super glad I have it. I still have it. I mean, he's about to leave for college, and I still have it just in case somebody gets some weird idea from somewhere, and I guess he'll be 18 soon enough, so maybe I can get rid of it. I mean, I add to it as we get more letters and more things and, more support, but the resource that Rachel put in there is a really good one too. And then like, if you're part of some like parent groups on like Facebook, things like that, or online, you can ask other parents what they have in theirs. And cause I kind of like picked and chose from different things that other parents had told me they put in theirs, but
Susan had posted that their child is 13 and neurodivergent, and it's mentioned about being non-binary and trans within the past couple of weeks. What resources would you recommend them as far as navigating finding information as far as how they're identifying, as well as including their now neurodivergent status? Priya, you might probably know a little bit more as far as the correlation between neurodivergent and them identified as non-binary and trans.
Yeah, actually, thank you. So Susanna, thank you for your question. And thank you for being here. So I think that, I mean, don't have expertise in this topic, but I do know that neurodivergence and the ability to think critically about one's gender identity often do go hand in hand, because our neurodivergent kids tend to have a more expansive understanding than our neurotypical kids in terms of a lot of different social constructions. So that isn't particularly surprising, but I would, Suzanne, I'd be happy to like do some research. If you want to email me, I can try to find some studies that might talk about the links between the two. I can't speak to it more than just that kind of overall argument. The other thing I would say is that all four of us have shared one version of a story, just like we all share trans-binary kids. We also have only one version of the story, which is our children expressed their authentic gender identity very young. But that's not the whole story. That's not everybody's story. And so I think that there's a way in which the media, looking for a narrative, has settled on this one, which is, I always knew. But in fact, when you talk to parents, that is not their experience. And when you talk to trans folks themselves, they will tell you that what we are sharing with you is not necessarily how it played out for them. So there could be a lot of reasons why around this age of puberty, your child is exploring both their sexual orientation and their gender identity. And I think we can understand how puberty would, with changes that happen in the body, would be a time where dysphoria happens for many people, because it's the first time their bodies are really feeling like their bodies are changing in a way that is not in accordance with their sense of self. And so that might be why at this age, and I know it feels very sudden to you, I wonder, I always say that usually the young person has been thinking about it for a very long time. But I hope that was the beginning of an answer. I know I didn't allay your anxiety, but you're an amazing mom for being here and asking that question, and your child is.
Susanna, Rachel
sorry.
did drop a resource in the chat, and Lauren also did offer her email if you want to connect you to some other resources.
yeah, I was just gonna say, my son was 13 when he transitioned, so about that age. It's not that uncommon, and he is also neurodivergent, so that is also not that uncommon. So he's not non-binary, but I do know a lot of parents of neurodivergent, non-binary, all over the map, families, and I have some really great support groups I think I can connect you with. If you send me an email, just know you're not alone. We all question what we're doing. We all feel like we're a little crazy, and the fact that you're here to listen and to get advice is a great first step, and certainly would be willing to assist with more.
I will just add that I think it's a fairly common narrative to hear with neurodivergent youth having that really urgent, seemingly sudden need to transition. I've heard that story quite often. And in my skimming of the article I just dropped that I haven't read, to be 100% transparent, it says that it's a very common thing to have a very quick and urgent need to transition.
Finn asked a question about experience finding mental and physical health resources for your child in your area, and how has that changed over the years, if it's been better or worse?
I don't necessarily know that there's more providers out there, but it's kind of that like mama bear parent network. Like you find other parents in the area that you're at. So then, you're like, hey, my kid needs a new pediatrician, or we're moving to this area, and they can connect you with other parents and, help you with people who are gender, affirming providers. I actually found my son's doctor, who I love, talking about him at work one day. And my coworker's like, oh, my husband is a nurse with this doctor and he's amazing. You should have your son go to him. And we did. And it's been over 2 years. We absolutely adore him, but like personal recommendations, just kind of using that network of community people you have. I know originally when my son first transitioned, we were on the military insurance and on the military base. So once I kind of got a hold of a doctor over there, there was literally one doctor, and they were like, oh, your son's trans, he has to go see this doctor. I mean, he was an amazing doctor, and I was so glad to have him, but literally they were like, he's the only one who deals, like all the trans kids go to him on post. Like, sorry, he's your doctor now. Luckily he was amazing, but it was also kind of scary. Like, what if we hadn't liked him? Like, you're just shoving us to one doctor. Hopefully they have more now, but he's since transitioned to, civilian medical care. So we have a little more choice, but I've had a lot of good interactions and even some not so good ones. So like we had his primary doctor is very gender affirming. We went to a dermatologist that she referred us to who was not. It was like a horrible experience. And, even though we took a recommendation from someone we really trusted and loved, it was just wasn't for us. So kind of got to take it with a grain of salt and see, but I always say, ask your community.
Yep, yeah.
One issue we had was that there's still in Orange County, I would say, a patchwork. And so we go to my husband is a physician and works at a clinic in the next county. We still don't have a pediatrician. I mean, we have one that's a friend of his who said, yeah, I can see your children, but I was told straight up by the former, like, I don't do that. I don't know what that means. And so we had to go to UC Irvine, which is our nearest university, to get care. On the therapy side, I would say, and I think I wrote you back, but 5 years ago, there was nothing for children, no affirming therapists for children. Now we have quite a few more, but the issue is often the ones we have access to, or the ones that queer folks have access to, are actually students. And so they change really often. And that's really, really difficult, not just for adults, but I would say more so for young people, to get to know somebody, to trust them. And then the next year you have to see somebody else. So we're paying out of pocket right now for mental health services. And that's a privilege that not everybody has. So yeah, we have a long way to go. But thank you for being an affirming therapist. That's amazing, because they're a lifeline for moms too.
Yeah, I just want to say something real fast. So I'm the one that asked that question. My wife my wife and I actually have our own nonprofit support network for the trans community. I'm trans, but my wife is a therapist for children now because she married a transgender man And now she's a therapist for transgender children because she saw the need out there and now works with suicidal ideation kids and stuff now. So yeah, it's been an amazing 10-year journey for us in that. And yeah, awesome. And I want to say something real fast for everyone that thinks that Texas is so bad. No, we have way more resources in Texas than in a lot of states. They're just more spread out. We have lots more resources in Texas than a lot of states. Hence California, Orange County, Irvine. Thank you. Thank you, Priya.
And with COVID still going on, with a lot of people socially isolating themselves to protect their health, has that affected your children and your family as a unit as far as navigating your children's transition as far as socially, or just living a normal everyday life during the pandemic? Has that affected anything?
One thing I wanted to say is that as a parent, I actually had that feeling like they're safe because they're at home. And I guess I bring that up because they didn't want to be home. But safety is, I would say, still the number one concern that maybe I can't speak for the other moms, but I'm assuming that we all have at all times, that sits in the pit of our stomach right here. And that's something that as a community, like we need to work a lot, which is student safety. And so that was just my perspective as a mom. But I do know that it helped us because we had built such a great supportive community around both my children that we were able to kind of maintain social ties, even though the kids were not at school. But yeah, they haven't had a hard time going back, but I had a hard time with them going back. It also meant I had to interact with really horrible parents again. So I would say, JD, that it's been harder for me than it has for my children. And I would take that any day, but I'm hoping for a day where it doesn't feel that way as a parent.
Lizette?
Oh, I just 100% agree. I was like, oh, my kid is safe. I don't have to spend 3 hours a day in the car because I drive my child to school 45 minutes away. And so, drop off, drive back, pick up, drive back is a 3-hour trek daily, because that's the safest district that allows him access to bathrooms and sports. And he's protected there. And so that was something that was off my plate. I will say that the pandemic allowed us reprieve from what we know as the legislative session that just passed. We were preparing for that, the leg session before, and COVID really shut all that down. It gave us a chance to sort of regroup, because I also feel like what people don't understand is that a lot of times parents carry the weight and burden of those fights, and we protect our children and we shield them from having to have that experience. And so we take on a lot of the brunt of that trauma so that they can be okay and move forward unscathed by the hate that these legislators put families through. And so I think that COVID shutting all that down gave a lot of us a chance to catch our breath. And unfortunately, us taking a moment to catch our breath, those of us that do advocacy work and that do this as activists, we didn't realize, or I can't speak for everyone, I didn't really look at that as like, oh my gosh, they took this whole year to prepare. And I'm unprepared, right? Because they came guns blazing with 200 plus anti-LGBTQIA bills. I think none of us were prepared for what that was going to look like. And I think what people don't also take into account is that these lobbyists and these legislators are well funded and they have the energy to do it because there's money funneling towards that goal all the time. And small grassroots orgs that are fighting this, that are offering support resources to trans people, they're not as funded, and it's running on volunteer time. And volunteers and activists get burnt out doing this work. And so we need allies to step in. We need allies and parents who do not see themselves as activists. We need parents to step in and say, I don't need to out my child in my advocacy work. I can show up as an ally and say that this is something that I care about, right? And this is something that's important to me and my community, and really start pushing for progress so that we are not on the defense every legislative session. And so that our kids can finally have the rights that they deserve. And we as parents can finally go to sleep at night without worrying about 500 things about like whether our kids will be safe or not tomorrow, and what will the future bring for them. So that's my soapbox on that, but thank you.
Anybody else want to chime in on that question?
Well, my son has been going to like online high school for the last 3 years before he graduated, mainly because we attempted real school and it didn't work. And had I listened, he would have started a year early here if I'd listened to Rachel. But so he's been home. The thing was, I went to work. So when I've been working from home for almost a year and a half now, so it's been a little different. Like he's very introverted. I'm an extrovert. Like I was climbing the walls within weeks. He, 18 months in and is still chilling. Like, okay, cool. So it was very different because I wasn't normally around him 24/7. I don't know if you've met 17-year-old boys, but they tend to be weird and gross. Like, sorry, but just the amount of weird and gross I was not realizing that he did when I was not home. It was just a little amazing. But I also really kind of cherished the last year that I've got to work at home because he did graduate a year early. So he is leaving me for college. And so we kind of we've always been close because I was a single mom for him for over 7 years. And so we kind of got to build a new sort of bond. Like we've always been super close, but allowing him to be more, I want to say adultish. Like I know he's not an adult yet, but kind of giving him more or a little more weight to his opinion, like letting him say like, hey, this is how I feel when this happens. Here's my boundaries, like I am allowed to have a little bit of privacy because, I'm almost an adult. If you ask him, he thinks he's an adult, but, just kind of negotiating those kind of like parent-child boundaries as he's getting ready for like the next step. But I really appreciated having a year with him at home to hang out and just spend time together. And I'd almost kind of forgotten how goofy and artistic he is because he kind of goes off in his room and does that thing. And just, he shared more of his artwork with me this past year than I think ever before. And just kind of getting to know that side of him again is great. But like for me, he's going to college. The COVID vaccine was required at college for his school, which is great. He is vaccinated. But I just have all this new fear coming my way. And I guess I didn't realize how much like I've kind of relaxed the last couple of years since he's been homeschooled. So realizing like how much anxiety all of this brings to me, not him, but to me, is like, oh, I forgot how this feels. It's uncomfortable after so long. So there's a lot of that.
Rachel, did you want
I mean, I don't know if I really need to respond. I can echo what everybody else said, but I sit in an immense amount of privilege in that I don't worry about my kid going to school. I've never worried about where Libby goes to school. Granted, that has taken a significant amount of work on my part in making sure before she enters any of the 3 schools that she's attended, that teachers have been given the education that they need, the training that they need. I've had many conversations, talked to as many people as I could, making sure that she's going into affirming environments. But I mean, she hated virtual and really, really wanted to be back in person. And she's well supported and loved exactly as she is in school. So I feel really, really fortunate.
With Texas entering a special session this month, and it's about to end, but the governor has already said that he will call a new one every single month until they pass their priorities, which is attacking transgender children and voter suppression. Instead of taking care of our like electrical grid and stuff, how do you recommend parents that want to be more proactive and advocating how to deal with the stress of doing that work? Because obviously we can recommend testifying, writing letters, and calling their legislators. Those are all easy things to do, but sometimes when we go to the Capitol or meet the legislators, there is a little bit of stress that comes with it if you're not aware of what's going to happen already. What would you recommend they do to prepare for that?
I'm just going to take this one off the bat because I have been at our Capitol for so many years now. And yeah, so I think it's obviously, putting it really mildly, to say that it's a little bit of stress. It's hellfire. But I will also add that I think it's more empowering than a lot of people would like or recognize necessarily. I mean, my kids, I mean, I've gotten heat for years for bringing my kids to the Capitol because they're little, but it gives them an actionable item. It gives them something to feel control over. They're going to the Capitol, they're facing their legislators, they're saying, I'm the person you're attacking. This is my sister. She's the person that you're attacking. Stop attacking my family and look at me in the eye. And giving, I mean, I think people don't necessarily give their kids enough credit, not anybody on this call, but like in general. People don't often realize that it can be a really empowering experience as much as it is stressful. I mean, it's been a holy nightmare. It's been the worst session this year ever. The hate, the vitriol that we experienced was awful, but it also gave us an opportunity to become really, really close to our House rep, who we are outrageously proud of, and she's amazing. And we are so well supported in many facets of this advocacy work. That, you know, my kids now have a personal relationship with their House legislator, and not everybody can have that because so many of them are terrible, but you can get to know other ones. And I think, you know, it's really important to talk to your kids before you make a decision to go to the Capitol, before you make a decision to do anything public. Check in with them every single time and make sure that they're good with that. Make sure that they want to participate or they're okay with you participating. And not everyone has to out their kid. I mean, you can show up, like Lizette mentioned, and say that you're an ally. But we had so many more people show up for the bathroom bill battle. And as many people as we have had show up, we need so many more. We need people in masses. We need people to show up and have the circus that we had in 2017 that shows them that Texans don't stand for this. And I know that there's so many reasons, COVID being a massive one, that that hasn't happened this year. But we really, really need people's voices. And I think we stand to make a lot of change when we can all come together and work on it. And I had something else to say that I forgot. Maybe I'll think of it if somebody else wants to add something.
So I've been at the Capitol a lot, well, in the spring, super a lot. But Rachel's done a few more legislative sessions than me. My son and I first started in the 2019 session, because right when the bathroom bill was coming out in 2017, he had just told me like a couple months before that, we had started his transition, so we weren't really like fully public yet, so we weren't ready to come like fight legislators, and thankfully Rachel's family and many other families did it for us. But the next legislative session, even though at that time we were still living a couple hours from Austin, I would ask my son, like, here's what bill's coming up. They need people for testimony. You're 15. Do you want to come? Do you not want to come? Do you not want me to go? Like, if there's media there, how do you feel about interviews? And he's done interviews. I've done interviews, mostly local stuff. But I always ask him, like, what are you comfortable with me saying and doing? And I let him read my testimony before I say anything, because it's, from a mom's perspective, but I do talk about him. So I always try to give him the ability to say, and it was so cute in the 2019 session, he had a suit that he wore to my wedding. And every time he showed up in this like 3-piece suit looking like so cute, and he has such a baby face back then. It's amazing how quickly they grow. But like legislators, like I remember one, he testified and one of them was like, there's no way you're trans. Like, you're a decent looking young man. And he was like, yeah, I'm not the boogeyman. Like, I don't know what y'all think we are. Like, we don't wear neon signs. We're not scary. Like, I'm a trans boy. This is how we look. Sometimes we wear 3-piece suits. 2021, his suit doesn't fit and he's kind of over trying to impress them. Now he's more like, I'm going to fight you. He's got that kind of anger. But yeah, he didn't come with me every time I went to testify. But most of them, he was there. And one thing that I know we both really kind of enjoy is the community. Like, he got to meet kids from all over the state. He even met a kid who's going to the same college out of state as him, which is really kind of cool. And they've been buddies since then. We also have a really great House representative. She actually wrote him a recommendation letter for college because he was her page for a day in the 2019 session. And we just happened to move to her district. So I made sure we moved to her district. So she's really amazing. I consider her a friend. Like, she'll text me every once in a while. She's one of the Democrats breaking quorum, so she's hiding out in DC. But I mean, it's just been kind of amazing to me. But then 2019, I don't feel like it was so angry. This session, I've been called the child abuser, cursed at, videotaped against my will. My child's had the same thing happen more than I expected. And I was kind of like brought in. Well, I mean, we all volunteer or whatever, but people are like, Lauren's done this before. You can talk to her. Like, I couldn't prepare new parents for the amount of horrible hatred I received this session because I hadn't seen it in the 2019 session. It was just like, where is this all coming from? I've been called child abuser so many times, so I should probably make it my nickname or something, but like, that doesn't really faze me. But the fact of the matter is, like, they were getting in children's faces and personal space and in my child's face. Like, I don't care that he's 17 and 5'8" and like full grown man. Like, he's my baby. He's 17. He's not an adult. Like, how dare you be in his face, like videotaping him? So I wasn't really prepared for that. Plus COVID, like, put a mask on and back up too. Like, it was kind of nerve wracking for that too, but it is empowering when you get your 2 minutes. I feel like it's it's always a long, long day, but it makes it pass quickly because you have your child's community and your community of parents with you. So it is super exhausting, lots of anxiety over it. I haven't really done much for this special session because I feel like all of our representatives, Democrats, ran away to Washington, D.C. to kind of prevent anything from happening. But I am trying to like mentally prepare myself for the August special session if he calls one. Like, I feel like the amount of hatred that is going on right now he isn't just going to keep calling them until the Democrats have to come back and until he can get something passed. So I feel like we definitely need everyone we can to help, but self-care is important. Your mental health is important. Don't put that on the back burner to please these idiots in our legislation.
I remembered what I was going to say. We all started not knowing what to say. We all started from a baseline of, I'm just going to tell you about my family. And there's a lot of us that have been doing this. So if anybody is just nervous, I am always around to read through testimonies, to give you feedback, to adjust language. And we all have to start somewhere, and we need all the help we can get.
And it's probably important to
I also want to say that there's,
go ahead, Lizette.
go ahead, Gordy. I'm sorry.
I
I was
think
going to
that-
say,
Go ahead.
just around allyship and advocacy, I also want to say that there are ways to show up for trans people outside of the legislative session. Proximity changes hearts. And what I often remind parents is that stealthness keeps you with the same level of stress and worry as visibility does, because you're worried about when people are going to find out and how to react to that, right? And that's how oppression works. Oppression works so that you're fearful of existing always. And visibility matters in these moments. Like, our children will never be safe until it's safe for them to be visible in all places, all the time. And so there are wonderful ways and easy ways to show support while still giving your child the agency about how visible they want to be. Sharing positive articles on social media is a great way of sharing information that is accurate and helpful to trans people. Looking beyond ourselves, like in terms of like not pushing assimilationist views when you talk about assimilation, because stealthness is not available to all trans people. And so when we constantly push a narrative of safety and privacy, we are totally not taking into account that there are trans people that cannot assimilate easily into, there are brown and Black people that can't assimilate, right? Because of the way that we look. And so there's just ways of being there, of showing up. Donate to organizations that are doing the work. Make sure that you're sharing information that's accurate on social media. Like, social media is a huge place to be able to have a conversation with your community, with people in your lives who say that they don't know trans people, maybe because they don't know that you have a loved one who's transgender. And constantly be on the lookout for opportunities to show up as an ally, right? If you can show up to a protest, or you can donate to an organization that's organizing something, do it. And then, you know, I just really want to push that visibility matters. It will always matter. Our kids will never be safe until they can just be.
Just real quick, I'm going to piggyback on Lizette. Thank you so much for that point about visibility and its importance. Another space that you can really show up are school boards. So a lot of the hate is at the school board level. That's something that we dealt with here. I know Lizette has dealt with that in Arizona. I know y'all deal with that in Texas. But showing up at your local city council, school board, whenever issues like comprehensive sex ed come up, or LGBTQ training for staff, or because often those of us who have children who are identify as queer or queer folks, we're the only people in the room for those conversations, and we don't feel safe to speak up the way we do when there's so many allies in the room. So that could be like another space that is really much more accessible, is your local spaces where politics and policies happen, and those affect children in your community immediately.
What I was going to say.
Can I add something to that too as well, Gordy?
Yeah.
And that I love what you said, Priya. And also, I will also add that pay attention to who you're voting for locally. locally, not just federally, or even the higher up state. As we say, vote down the ballot, vote all the way down the ballot, and pay attention to who you're voting for. Do your own research. Don't let people tell you, oh yeah, they're an ally. Are you kidding me? We have Lucio right now who claims to be a Democrat in Texas. He isn't a Democrat. Give me a break. Pay attention to who you're voting for. If it just has a D, then don't take that at face value. And I'm not trying to sway you either way. All I'm saying is, please pay attention, especially judges. Judges are the ones that grant name and gender marker changes. I am in Arlington, which is in Tarrant County. I'm literally right smack in the middle of Dallas and Fort Worth, but I had to go to Dallas County to get my name and gender marker changed because there is no judge in Tarrant County at all, or Denton County, or Johnson County, or any other county. And it's because people are not paying attention to who they're voting for and the judges. So that's my little soapbox. I ran for office in Texas. So that's my soapbox. Pay attention to who you're voting for. Pay attention to who you're voting for. Yay. Thank you.
What I wanted to say is that if you're going to donate financially to organizations, try to look for the trans-led organizations because they're extremely underfunded. For every $100 that a LGBTQ plus organization raises, trans organization raises about equivalent of 3 cents to that $100. So I'm not saying don't vote to the big organizations like Equality Texas and HRC like that, but look for other organizations like Tent, who's doing an amazing work here in Texas and across the country as well. But definitely look for trans-led organizations, especially if there's any that you know of that are Black trans-led organizations, because they're extremely underfunded. They're only funded when there's a murder happening that has happened. So that's what I would do. Before we wrap up, my last question would be, what advice or positive piece of advice would you like to provide to parents that who are on this call, may not be on this call, but may watch later? What positive advice would you give them to navigate this, whether it be a rushed journey or a slow journey over a couple of years? Like, what would you recommend them and tell them?
I would say that you have been given a gift. A gift, I mean, gift doesn't even begin to describe the way we feel about our children, but a gift to have this incredible person in your care, and the gift to go on a journey with them, not the same journey as they go on. And in that journey, you will be given the gift to grow and evolve as a person. I think, Rachel, I think you might have said that before, that you find that you know so much more, you have more understanding, you've met people who have changed your life in ways that you couldn't imagine. And I would say that, like, when I look back at who I was 6 years ago, I'm so proud that all of us in our family have become the people that we are. And it's because this young person was so sure and brave and incredible. So really, truly, it's a gift.
I can't echo that enough. I mean, our kids are amazing and we learn so much from them. And the best that we can do is follow their lead. I mean, I always tell my kids I'm making the best decision I can with the information I have in the moment. So we try to be as open with each other as possible and talk through as much as possible. And that's the best we can do as parents, is support our kids and exactly what they need. So yeah.
I would say to get used to living in discomfort, because our children and their journey force us to look at inward at ourselves and our own biases, and force us to grow and learn from what we've been conditioned to believe, because we are all conditioned to believe we've all have participated and learned stereotypes, and we're conditioned by society at large. So be comfortable in the discomfort of your growth and learning, because like both Priya and Rachel have said, I want to be my son Daniel when I grow up because he's pretty cool. Like I, as 14, was not as brave as my son is. I, at 8, was not as brave as my son was to just assert himself in such a way, to push against societal norms and say, like, this is not who I am. This is who I am, right? And so I think that, I mean, if I could be him in 10, 20 years, I'm winning, right? So be comfortable in the discomfort, know that you're not alone, connect to resources, find us on Facebook, and just like, it's an incredible experience. Daniel has changed my life for the better, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So thank you for letting me share today, Gordy, and it's been an honor to be on this panel with these amazing.
Yeah, I would have to echo what everyone said. There was a lot of discomfort at first, more because I didn't have the education, and partially because my son is one of those kids who had made up his mind and, you know, was plowing 5,000 miles per hour ahead with it. Definitely follow your kids' lead, but I have to say, like, be willing to learn from your kids too. Like, I had questions every step of the way, and you can ask the doctors and you can ask your community, who are all very vitally important. But sometimes just asking your child, like, are you sure this is what you want to do? What are your reasons for wanting to do, you know, whatever it is, or what are your reasons for doing this or that? So you can kind of hear it from them. I think you'll be amazed at the confidence your child will gather once they're living their true authentic self. And also, I have to say, for almost every trans kid I've met, the amount of maturity that they have, just because of things that unfortunately they've had to go through living in this society, it's just amazing. And every single child I've met, whether they're public or stealth or, you know, whatever it may be, they all have some goal as an adult to how to better the world, make the next generation have it even better than they did, and how to change the world. Like, my son is going off to college. He's going to be a nurse. He wants to be able to help, like the medical professionals have helped him through his life and everything. And it's just open communication with your family, whether that's just you and your whether it's family or siblings or whoever it is, just keep the dialogue open. You don't necessarily always have to say yes if the child's asking for something, but being able to have a discussion about why that's a no now, or, you know, when that can happen or if that can happen, it allows them to feel some sort of independence and authority over their own bodies and how things are going. But yeah, find your community, follow your kids' leads, and always keep talking with your kiddos.
Did anybody want to offer any advice to any trans children that might come across this video?
I would want them to know that the advocacy work that we do is not just for our own children, but for their community. And whether they're supported in their home or not, like, there is a whole community of us pushing for their safety and well-being too, and that they are loved and aren't alone, and that we'll keep pushing until we get the Equality Act passed, or some sort of policies that will protect kids nationwide, because they are deserving of achieving all their dreams and goals that they have set in their heart. And so there's a whole bunch of us that are committed to making that happen.
Yeah, I would have to second that. First, you are worthy, you are lovable. I know society and maybe even your family may not always say so, but living your authentic true life is going to give you an amazing life. And just know that there's so many people in your community and so many people that will be behind you 100% of the way. You're just an amazing person, and just keep working towards that authentic life dream, and know that you can get support and resources where you need it, and that, you know, we'll always have parents like all of us here on the panel, and, you know, our children and other members of the community fighting for the Equality Act and making sure that, you know, one day it doesn't matter and that nobody can do anything to harm you or make you feel less than.
Rachel or Priya?
I would just say you have a lot of parents fighting for you. That's just to echo what was already said. That's there's a lot of love out here for you, and if you don't find that in your home, know that we still love you and have your back, and appreciate you for exactly who you are.
And I'll just echo everyone here, but to also thank you for having the courage to and the insight to really make us question these systems that have been oppressing people throughout centuries. And you're paving the way for so many others to push back and free themselves of the many different oppressions that we face in our lives. So not only are you loved, but you are leading.